Hey everybody, welcome to the Kickstarter preview for Fate of the Elder Gods. If you're happening along this video on my YouTube channel, there'll be a Kickstarter link at the bottom of the video. This is a new game from Richard Launius, who designed Arkham Horror and Defenders of the Realm, and Chris Kirkman and Daryl Lauder of Dice Hate Me Games, who have designed a whole bunch of games themselves. As the name might imply, this is set in a H.P. Lovecraft type of universe. What players are going to be doing in this game is trying to summon those elder gods that you usually are trying to combat. So you will be controlling a group of cultists trying to summon Cthulhu or Zazoth or Yog-Sothoth and all those kinds of crazy demons into the world. Meanwhile, trying to sort of fend off and send away investigators and put them on the case of the other investigators, the other players, or the other cultists, the other players at the table. So let's jump into how the game actually works, and then I'll come back and give you some thoughts on it. Okay, I've gone ahead and set up the game here for a 3-player game. As always with these previews, this is all Kickstarter prototype art and components. Now what you're looking at here in the main board is called the Fate Clock, and you've got different locations here in each of these different wedges, and then you have the abyss here in the center. So players will start with their little minions here, and just to show you an example, even though this is a prototype, it's pretty cool. So this is the green player's minion. You're going to have 7 minions in the abyss per player, and then each player is going to have 1 in each of these different locations, and you're also going to have 1 investigator, and you do not like these guys in this game. So there'll be 1 investigator in each of these different wedges as well. And then you can see I've taken and seeded some cards and different tokens and things around the board. Some of the different locations will interact with different cards. So for example, if you go to the museum here, you can get one of these artifact cards, which I'll explain in a minute. Now you can also see off the side here, I just put the black pieces over there. There's some different old ones that you're trying to summon. Now over here we have the 3 players who are in play for this particular example. And I'm just going to show you Ithaquah here because he also does come with some of these squall tokens, and he has a special ability that he'll make use of those with. Now each player is going to have this clock, and it starts here at 0 and then moves up to 9. So what you're trying to do is a couple of things. The main way to win the game is to actually go ahead and get this to tick up, and there's be different special abilities and effects and all kinds of things to get that to move. Once you get it to 9, you are the team that has summoned its particular old one, and you have won the game. You'll also notice here you start with 7 minions, or cultists actually, on your player board, and there's a little description of your special ability. Now the other thing that you can get on here, and these that you don't want, are these elder signs, and these are actually going to fill up in reverse order. So if you ever fill this up all the way back here to the beginning, then you have lost the game for sure. And then all the other players are going to compare, and whoever has the least amount of elder signs is going to be the winner. If it's a tie, then whoever has progressed their summoning token the furthest. So there's a way to trigger the game and end it by winning or by losing, and then you figure out the winner as I explained. Now taking a look back at the main board, let's talk about how a turn is actually going to work. Now each player will get 2 player aids. This side will show you the general turn order, so you're always going to go through all of these steps. You're going to do a prepare, a move, activate, and then a conclude step. On the back side, it shows you a little bit of information about the icons and what the different dice results will mean, and as well as raid rules, because what's going to happen is sometimes these investigators are going to theoretically invade your base, and they will cause you all kinds of havoc, and you might try to trigger raids on other players as well. So there's a little description of the raid rules here, but let's jump through the turn. So the first thing you're going to do is prepare. So you might unexhaust artifacts. You will get these artifacts here. Some of them are kind of like once per turn uses, and sometimes you can use them out of turn, but they will have 1 exhaust effect, and then they don't unexhaust until the start of your turn in the prepare step. So the main thing you're going to be doing is moving this token here. So there's actually 2 of these. In a 3 and 4 player game, you'll just use 1 of these, and then in a 2 player game, each player will kind of be controlling their own. So that's really the only difference between a 2 and then a 3 or 4 player game. So what you're going to do is take and move this, and you have to move it to another one of these wedges, another one of these locations. So I could just take and move it here and so on. Now the way that you do that is through playing cards. Now there's a stack of these spell cards, and you can see these have different backs on them. It's got the yellow symbol here, these different blue symbols, and so players will start the game with 3 of these. So we'll start with a hand of 3 of these, and you can get more here by visiting the library and so on. And these are kind of dual use cards, so you can play them and use kind of their symbol. You can use this symbol on the back of the card for multiple ways. And then there's also spells on this side. So players will always know what you've kind of got in your hand. They'll see what symbols you've got, but they're never really going to know what exact spell effects that you have. Now you can see the cost here to actually execute the spell is 1 white symbol and then another blue symbol there. So the way that you actually move this guy here is you will take and put face down the symbol of the location you're going to move to. So I'm going to take and I'm going to lay this here above this symbol. So he's going to go there, and then I'm going to take and execute the effect here. And so if I wanted to then maybe on a later turn move him to the yellow spot, which is up here, I'll take and put that there, and this will go here. So you can see what's happening is you start to build up a queue of symbols. So later on somebody might have played this one here. If this token was here and they wanted to move him to the white spot, which is right here, they would have to play that card. So you need to play the matching symbol to move him. And now you can see we've kind of started to build up this, the game calls it a column, and these are sort of magical energies. Now you can always put 2 of the matching symbols. So if I put two yellows here like so, then I can move it anywhere that I want. And you may also acquire these gate cards here, and you can see these are double-sided. These can also act as a wild. You put those face down and you can move the little figure here anywhere that you want. Now when you move this character to a particular wedge, there's a couple things you're going to do. You're going to check and see if there are 3 or more investigators. If there are, at the time that you move this figure here, then you will take all of the investigators at that location and then move it over to your board, and they're going to be starting to get ready to raid your domain. So after you check that, and let's say we were the green player doing that, we're going to take 1 of our cultists off of our board. We're going to put that in the location, and then we'll take 1 investigator here and then put him also on that location. So we're going to start to build up more and more characters here. So now we're going to be able to take the action associated with the location that we move to. So each action has sort of a basic action, and then it also has a control action. So right now we actually have control because we have the most cultists here. So we could also take the basic action and the control action. However, if you don't have complete control, then you can go ahead and roll a die to see if you get control. And what you're looking for is this symbol here, and this is always good when you are trying to do anything in the game, basically. So these are the good symbols here. Now players will have another aid card, and this is going to give you a summary of all of the different locations in the game here. So now we've moved here to the ceremony, and it shows you can gain a gate card and then activate your special ability, and that's what that symbol means. Now if you have complete control, which we do in this case because we've got the two guys there, we can sacrifice 2 of our cultists from the ceremony and then advance 1 on your summoning track. So we'll do that. We'll go ahead and we'll add this to our hand. Remember, this is going to act as a wild. And then we can sacrifice, if we wanted, 2 of the cultists into the abyss here. And then bang, right away, we're 1 step up on our summoning track. So let's talk about some of the other locations and what they do. And the first location here is this other worlds, and this is kind of the main area where you possibly will get a lot of gains on your summoning track. So what you're going to do is you're going to roll a die for each of your cultists that are here. So let's say we had 3 cultists. In this case, we're looking for either this kind of Cthulhu sign or the tentacle. In this case, either of these is good. And for each of those rolled, we can move up 1 on the summoning track. Now, when you do that, you've got to sacrifice all of the cultists into the center of the board. However, if you have complete control, then instead of them going to the abyss, they can go right back to your lodge, your main player board. Moving over to the museum, when you go here, you can choose 1 of the 2 face-up artifacts, and then you'll discard the other one under the bottom of the deck and deal 2 more. If you have complete control, you can wipe these out, deal 2 new ones, and then pick from there. If you also have 3 cultists here, you can sacrifice them and then remove these elder signs from your board. Remember I said you could get these, and you don't want these because it's going to get you closer to losing the game, so you can actually heal yourself a little bit and remove those. The next spot here is the Streets of Arkham, and I apologize it's upside down, but this is one of the ways that you can actually raid other players. You can see it says give 2 investigators and then raid. So you can take these investigators either off of your own lodge or from the supply, and you can send them to 2 different locations or give them both to the same player, and then everybody has to roll for the raid. If you have complete control, you can, after the raid only, sacrifice one of your cultists and then additionally place 1 investigator on everybody's board. So let's talk about how a raid works. So let's say I had to roll for a raid here and I had 3 of these investigators there. What you do is you always roll 1 die for each investigator. So I'll go ahead and roll that. And then that was actually a very good roll. We'll go ahead and look at the results here. So here we can see, if this gets in focus, if you roll the Cthulhu here, you can destroy 2 investigators. So bam. If you roll the tentacle, you can destroy 1. If you roll the little stick here, you have to gain 1 elder sign and then destroy 1 of the investigators. For each of these elder sign tokens here, you gain an elder sign. You don't get to destroy anybody. And so you get to do that, and then you just execute all those in the order that you wish. And then any investigators that you don't destroy is going to hang around and try again later. Now, there are some other ways that a raid will happen. If you ever have 5 or more investigators on here, that will trigger a raid. And there may be other spells and curses and things, which I'll talk about in a minute, that will directly trigger a raid. So the gathering here is actually how you're going to get more of your cultists out of the abyss back onto your player board. Once you go here, you're going to gain 3 cultists, and then you can move 1 from the gathering to any other location. If you have complete control, then you can move as many as you want out of the gathering to other locations. And finally, we have the library, which is going to deal directly with these spell cards, which I'm going to talk a lot more about right now. So if you go to the library, the normal action is you just get to draw 3 of these cards. Now, there's no hand limit to the amount of spells you can have in your hand. Also lets you ready 1 additional spell. Normally you can ready a spell in your conclude step, but now you can ready up to 2 spells. And the complete control special ability of this place is if you sacrifice 1 of your cultists, then you can actually ready 1 of those spells for free. So let's talk about readying your spell, and this moves us into the conclude step. So when we move into the conclude step, the first thing we're going to be able to do is ready at least 1 spell, maybe 2 if we went to the library. And you're going to look at the location that you activated, and then look at all of the symbols, include the one printed on the board, and see if you have any spells that match that criteria. So here I've got the 2 yellow stars and then the blue comet there, which I've got here. So I go ahead and show that to everybody. So here I've got the requisite pieces in place, and then I'll take and put this face down in front of me next to my player board. So this spell is ready, and I could immediately cast this if I wanted. Sometimes, it's going to give you specific criteria. So this is at the end of your turn, you may sacrifice 1 cultist and become cursed to immediately take another turn. So that might be a cool little combo. You move here, cast the spell, move somebody else. And I'll talk about being cursed in a minute. You maybe don't want that to happen, but you might do it to kind of push, towards the end of the game to win. So you can ready that, and like I said, you can ready an additional spell, and if you can ready a spell for free from having the complete control action, you just put it face down. Now, the interesting thing about this is once you ready this now acts as an available symbol to ready other spells. So maybe I'm here later on, and now I've got 2 white symbols. Whatever's in the column and also whatever's in front of me can be used. Now the thing is though, after you ready a spell, all of the cards that were in the column that you used to ready are going to be discarded. So these aren't going to get too big after a while, because people will start using them to ready spells. And then after you've readied a spell, then you can draw 1 card off the spell deck, or up to 3 cards. If you've depleted your hand, you're always going to have a minimum of 3 cards at the end of your turn. And at this point is when you're going to check if you have 5 investigators, at which point they're going to do a raid on you. So let's just talk about artifacts real quick, and then I'll talk about curses, which hint is my favorite part of the game. So let's take a look at an artifact. There are a variety of artifacts, but there's kind of 2 main ways to activate them. And sometimes, different effects and things will tell you how to activate them in different ways. But typically you will see this symbol here, and that means to exhaust it. And like I said, it unexhausts at the start of your turn. So you can change on the die roll one of these symbols to one of these, because these are usually bad and these are usually good. You can sacrifice it means destroy it, to change this to this. Now if you exhaust it, you can't exhaust it and then sacrifice it later. You've got to unexhaust it first. So these just give you all kinds of cool special effects and things that you can go find and do. Now as I said, the curses are my favorite part of the game. Now you can get curses from different special effects and things. There's one other way to get curses, so let me just show you that now. Now if you remember, you can start to accrue these elder signs around this wheel here. Now the first time that you move your summoning token and it touches one of these elder signs, you're immediately going to get a curse. So it's not likely that you will go through a game without getting a curse. Now the way that the curses work is you're going to take and hand these to the player on your left. They're going to actually draw the card. They're going to read when it happens, and then they're going to know the effect. You're not going to know that. You're just going to know something bad's going to happen when I do something in the game. So let's look at this example here. When the curse cult advances their summoning track, so if I had drew this for Billy and Billy then advanced in the summoning track, I would say stop, and then I would read this and then say the forces in Arkham are onto you, using all means to ensure your elder god never awakens. So they would gain 2 more elder signs. So once you've drawn one of these, of course, you've got to start paying attention to who you are managing, so to speak, and managing their curses. So that's how curses work. So that's how you play the game. And again, the 2-player game, the only difference is this guy will also start down here. Each player will manage a different one, and they can never be on the same spot after the start of the game. And you'll never directly control the other players, but there are some spells and things that will allow you to control either one. So sometimes you might mess with where this one is. So that was Fate of the Elder Gods. I hope you enjoyed the rules overview. Now, this game kind of snuck up on me a little bit because I wasn't really sure what to expect, from reading the rules. It's got a couple of things going for it that I tend to like. And the first thing is the multiple use cards. So you get this hand of cards, you got the spell effects on one side, you got the symbols on the back. And there's a couple of things that you're trying to consider. So you need to play the cards and stack them in the different columns to be able to move the figurine around and activate the different areas. And then you're trying to say, okay, well, I want to keep this spell, looks really, really good. It's going to do some damage to my opponent, or it's going to allow me to, maybe score some extra movements on the summoning track and so on. And then you've got the spaces on the board. So that kind of acts sort of like a worker placement thing, because once you move the figurine, the next player has to move it off there. So you're sort of technically blocking that. And so that can come into play, especially with the 2-player game when you've got 2 of those figurines, moving around. And then you're really trying to piece together all of these different kind of crazy combos. So it's got that kind of, if you're into magic or cosmic encounter or that kind of thing, where you're like, oh, I'm trying to, combine this effect with that effect, and then boom, do this really cool turn. That's really cool because you've got sort of the general effects on the board, the different spells. You've got each of the different elder ones has their own kind of special ability and the thing that they can try to do to exploit. So like one example is you don't want to ever send investigators to Azazoth, because if they if they somehow get some elder signs on them, that can actually help them, move things along and so on. So they each have, kind of a different little exploiting thing that you're trying to do. Now the game can be a little bit nasty. You can trigger raids and things on people, but the raids may come to, no fruition. The curses, though, are my absolute favorite part of this game. I really enjoy it. And if you think of them, they're kind of like evil crossroads cards. If you're familiar with a game called Dead of Winter, it has this thing where you flip a crossroads card, and if somebody triggers that special effect, then you have this little story moment. Well, these are kind of the same. They kind of hang around and they kind of sit there, and you're like, okay, what's going to happen? Because the curse is going to happen at some point. And then as the person that drew the curse card, you can, wait there and kind of sit there sinister and laugh and wait for them to, to try to do something to trigger it. So that can be very nasty as well. So the game to me has a nice balance between that sort of chaotic kind of, Lovecraftian kind of stuff going on with some cool different strategic or tactical types of elements happening. And you have a real sense of sort of tension, especially towards the end of the game, where you're trying to really make the most use out of the cards that you've been dealt, out of the kind of the position of things on the board. You're trying to maybe go and get, control of an area to do and exploit those extra special abilities as well. So there's kind of an area control thing, but it's not, that part of the game isn't really the nasty part. So a lot of people can kind of sometimes be turned off by that. but that's just kind of like, you know, I've got control so I can do this special thing now. So I would definitely take a look at this one, look at the Kickstarter project. You know, I'll probably feature this, I'm definitely going to feature this in the vlog, either already released or up and coming. So this is kind of one of my top 20 games to look out for at Gen Con 2016. Really surprised me in a lot of ways. So there's kind of the review side of this is like, you know, it didn't make it into my top 20 Gen Con 2016 games coming out. So take a look at that vlog as well. And they are going to be actually demoing this at Gen Con if you're going there. So this video will for sure be up before Gen Con if you haven't watched the other video. So you can definitely sit down there and play it and get a demo of it. And I highly recommend that you do. So thanks.